All right, are we ready?
We're ready.
Put your headphones on there, homie. All right, we're now officially everyone's on board because today's fun. I'm excited about today's topic.
Boarded. Let's ready to fly.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Raised Hunting Podcast. And again, I have Warren and Easton here, and we're going to what? Shocker, huh?
Yeah.
I just want people to know.
Well, they're aware,
Okay.
I think, now.
Okay.
Let them
Well,
know.
And if you guys like some of the stuff you're hearing, please let us know. And if you don't like it, let us know that too. And
No,
we
you
can
don't
get
let
rid
us
of
know
we
that.
can get rid of people if we need to. So it just reviews. You review that individually or however you want.
If I didn't
Okay.
even tell you that people have been nice enough that they've been leaving us reviews on Spotify, you wouldn't know because he does not type our name into the platform and see.
I don't even know what the platform is.
See,
So
that's what I was saying.
all right. So today we are taking a topic that someone did write in and asked us to talk about, and that is hunting a new piece of property. And I thought this is an outstanding piece to cover because we're doing it right now. I've done it for years. You're going through a different stage of it than what you are right now. And so anyhow, we thought that this would be a great one to tackle. And it's deer season right now, so some of the stuff that we can talk about is exactly. Now, it will vary. Well, I mean, somewhat like if you're hunting public land or private land or even private ground, though, it just depends on the nature of the size of the piece of ground, the lay of it, and stuff like that. So, who wants to start? And maybe we start with a question. And what's the very first thing that we do or that you do when you get permission to hunt a new piece of ground?
Scout, 100 walking around everywhere, and it depends on the time of year though. Now, I guess right now, October 24th, 24th, so we're getting pretty close to the rut. If I were to, for whatever reason, pick up a new piece of land right now, if you have a saddle, would be nice to be able to go take your saddle and be mobile and start sitting in places where you think it'd be good. Otherwise, what I've done in the past before saddles, or I even paid attention to them, I take I'll walk around as much as I feel comfortable not screwing up the deer, and then I'll set 2-3 stands or whatever, or however many I want to set, in just spots where I think that they're going to be.
And
rutting.
what do you pick? When you have no idea other than, let's just say you got a brand new piece of property, why are you setting a stand in X?
Well, I think start with, because he had a good point on, let's start with what time of year are we talking about?
Yeah.
Are we talking, because I think that makes a huge difference. Are we talking, January to March? Are we talking summer? Or are we talking hunting season?
Let's talk hunting season. Let's just say you
Okay.
just knocked on some, you have permission to hunt a piece of property. You're pulling in one day, you see the neighbor, and neighbor says, hey, you're welcome to hunt my land too. Now what do? Hunting season's already in, and you got to figure this out right now if you want to hunt there.
Pretty much anywhere I'm not going to rely on, unless they have really good food as far as ag, like corn and stuff that's in. I might sit that if it's early enough during the season. Other than that, I'm going to pretty much focus all my energy on bedding, where I can find their bedding. If it's like right now, I'm going to look for scrapes. I'm looking for rubs. Basically where I think that they're living and hanging out, because where they're living or where they're bedding typically, in my opinion, is where they're going to start rutting the most. That's where their first round is going to be, where the bucks are going to naturally be around does that are in the area, and they're going to get their does there. So that's where I want to be to start. After that, then you got to find where they're going. But
So bedding area, you'd say, is your number one.
I want to find
That's
in
what
the
you're keen
trees,
on.
in the trees where they're living.
What
And that's
about
where
you,
I'm going.
Warren?
I'm going to take, the first thing I'm going to start with is online. Just being able to look at maps and get an idea, what does the neighbor's stuff look like? What does it look like over here? Especially for guys that maybe they get permission somehow and they are in another state, and so don't get to go there yet. But once I do that, I don't rely on that because sometimes there's stuff that I feel like I look at and I'm like, man, that looks really good, and then I get there and it's junk.
Or the other way around.
Yeah,
spots
exactly.
that don't look good on like the map, and then you walk there and you're like, oh crap, this looks
Absolutely.
really good.
OnX and things like that are super helpful to an extent.
Yeah, like for instance, I guess the exact example I would talk about is I just did this the other day on a new piece of property that we're hunting, and I my method. Well, first I looked online and looked, at the maps, and there's a couple spots I thought would be really good, And the farmer had a whole bunch of cows in some of those areas that I believe really ruined most of the habitat to where a deer wouldn't really, there's nothing there for them. There's no food, there's no cover, there's no reason that a deer would be there. That looked good on the map. But then I found other spots where I would think that probably weren't as good, that had lots of cover and were really good. So I'd say the second thing that I do once I've looked at the online maps and looked at that, then the second thing that I'm doing is I'm gonna swallow my pride and say, I guess not my pride, but swallow the feeling of, oh gosh, I'm gonna run everything out, and I'm walking through the whole thing. I'm gonna take one day, and I am going to walk through that entire piece of property. Obviously, if it's a 1,000-acre farm or something that you have, you may not be able to make it through it. But I'm going to take my time. If it's a smaller piece of property, I'm going to take the entire day, and I'm going to walk through all of it. And then I think, like Easton said, I really do believe that if you're during the October time period up till now, which is today's the 23rd, if you're not finding scrapes, 24th, if you're not finding scrapes and you're not finding rubs, you're not near where the majority of the deer are. I do think that most of the scrapes and rubs that most of the time, yeah, we know it's raining.
Yeah, should we wait? 'Cause I hear it in the you guys can't hear it in there?
It's good.
I think we're okay. Don't you? You might listen to it. I mean, you're going to hear the rain.
Yeah, it's fine. Sorry about that. Anyways, so I do think that, one, I'm going to be looking for bedding areas. I'm going to be looking for food. I'm going to be looking for all that, and then I'm going to try and find areas that lots of scrapes and lots of rubs. I don't think your bucks are going very far, so I think your rubs are going to be pretty close to wherever that is. Then, like Easton said, I think you're going to find a couple spots that are like, man, I have to have a stand here.
Okay, but hold on. Let me ask. Would you hunt a stand? Would you just pop up a stand one morning and say, I'm going to hunt for a little bit and then take off walking, do your scouting in the middle of the day? Or are you saying you wouldn't even bother? And Easton brought up one of the things that really is handy for people now is if you are capable of using a saddle or a ground blind or something that you could just put it up right now and be in there. You don't have to put up all the sticks and put a stand in, and now you got everything. You're kind of anchored there. But I'm just asking that question, whether you guys would you go ahead and hunt a morning? Because I would like to add, the one thing that I start when I look is I'm looking for edges. I'm looking for creek crossings. I'm looking for fence crossings. I'm looking for natural funnels. And those tend to be places that I take myself, because even if I figure out where the bedding and the feed is, then I know those areas are going to be travel corridors where I'm probably going to sit. The other one is possibly putting up like a observation stand or parking somewhere that I could visibly watch the fields or something like that.
Oh, I think that's huge. I think that, especially with the saddle, I think you should probably spend some more time. Like if you can see somewhere where you can see, that gives you the idea where you can sit in one afternoon and see, okay, hey, all the deer came out of this corner into this food source, or none came out of where I thought they were going to. Yeah, I think that is huge. I honestly think that if I didn't like hunting so much, I hear a lot of these guys say that hunting doesn't kill deer, scouting kills deer, and I think that they're right. But I would rather hunt. I'm not going to take a day and drive around or sit up on a hill and glass or something that I could be in a stand. But I do think that, especially on a new piece of property, that can give you some great information where observations sit.
Absolutely.
I know. One thing I'm doing right now. So the reason Dad said that I'm in a different point with learning land is because we were just talking about it the other day, and it's been 3 years now, and that's kind of, I think, depending on the size of land, normally it's going to take you probably around 3 years to really hone in on your deer in the area. And the reason I say that would be, one, because of crop rotations. At 3 years, you're going to have different crop rotations.
You'll
be able to see, which I've noticed. I now know, like, when I have corn in a certain spot, they definitely are, like, on this side of the farm a heck of a lot more, as opposed to if it's beans. So they rotate. So that's one thing that I'm watching as far as why it takes me so long to learn a farm. But right now I have a new spot, and I just said it to Joey the other day. We took a day where it was hot. We weren't going to probably be sitting, and kind of refined. So, like, all these stands that we do have out, I've started moving a little bit, because I'm like, okay, I've now sat here and seen them. They're consistently coming this way in the morning, and in the evening I'm just 40 yards off, whatever it is. So I move everything.
Well, that would be your swallowing your pride. I mean, when you said that a minute ago, I mean, you have to be able to admit, I messed up. I'm 40 yards off, or I'm 100 yards off.
But very rarely are you going to be able to go and put a stand in in the spot on the first
and
time.
I wouldn't even say messed up. I would say, because, like, right now, I completely called a win. I went and put a stand down in a spot where I knew they were in there, but didn't know where to put the stand. I sat there and we're like, it's our stand is on fire right now, but we haven't got a shot out of it. So in my opinion, it's a win because I've now discovered something new. So now I moved the stand, you refine a little bit, added another one. But what I was gonna say, the new thing I'm doing is I just told him when we were pulling one of the cameras, there's one spot that I haven't really hunted a lot, and I said, you know what, dude, right in here is kind of open enough. I bet this lights up with rubs and scrapes and everything. I think they're really gonna like it. But I say that we get a stand in here one day and just really plan on not shooting anything. Maybe if we get lucky, but try to get as high as we can in this stand or in this tree, because specifically where I'm at, typically we're hunting 16 to 20 feet, something like that.
That's on
I'd
average.
say that's about what mine are at. And I would like to get as high as I could in a tree in that spot, just for the fact of I know that if I'm high enough in that area, it's open around enough that I'll be able to see like 200 or 300 yards up the way and just observe. So that's one thing that I'm going to do here real soon, like probably within the week, go set a stand solely for if I get a shot out of it, I get a shot out of it. But mainly to be able to say, okay, before I go commit to right here, I'm going to commit to a different spot to see where maybe I need 2 stands, maybe I need 3 stands, maybe there isn't even deer in it. But you know what I mean? So that's a strategy I'll use to get as high as I can to see as far as I can.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is a game changer now, especially for learning properties, is cell cams,
Oh, yeah.
because you're getting that information instantly instead of having to go and check the cards. So and that's why I said, go ahead and just as bad as you may not want to go and walk through it and be like, I'm going to run everything out. Eli and I just did this the other day, and we bumped a really good buck. Like him and I, one of those where we looked at each other like, oh man, but we found a scrape near that where he was bedded, because he was bedded when we bumped him. Found a scrape, put a camera on it in the timber closer to his bedding area, and then we're not sure if it was him, but within 3 days we had 2 different bucks that we knew one of them was him during daylight. So here we took the risk and went in there, and sure, it felt bad at the moment. We were like, oh no. But then he was there within 2 days. I'm not sure if it was the first one, then he was there that night. If it was the other one, then it was 2 days or 3 days. But we had both of them on the camera in daylight within 3 days of us going through there. The other thing I would say that I learned, and this one I do have to swallow my pride because I think it's from you. I used to be the guy that I always wanted to sit on the fields or on the edges where I could see everything, which I think is good for learning. But I had some spots where we'd sit in the timber and you don't see any deer. And you're like, oh, I'm never going to sit in the timber because you're not going to see anything. You know where they're going. And I think that is what the difference is between then and now, is now we understand where to sit in the timber. We know because there is certain spots where I think you can go sit in the timber, like unless you're hunting a specific deer, if you're in the wrong spot, you ain't going to see nothing.
Yeah.
But if you sit in the right ones, my best sits have all been in the timber. By far. That's just where deer are spending more of their time during the day.
And I think with that, just to clarify, because I know we're on the same page, you might see a ton of deer on a field. How many of those deer are actually coming
Close
within
enough to
shooting
shoot,
distance?
right.
And I'm the same way. I would 100% rather have 2 deer that come by me that are within shooting distance than see 20 in an evening and not even one comes close.
Well, here's the other thing I hate. I hate about fields, and Eli and I ran into this the other day, is I don't know how you can sit a field edge almost anywhere where you're not getting winded
By something.
every night. Like
Yep.
it's almost impossible. Where I have
You're gonna
spots
get
in the timber,
surrounded.
yeah, where deer can all get by me. That's the
Yep.
other thing I would say is you really want to pay attention to, one, sit those spots in the timber more than once. Don't only sit there one time and be like, okay, this spot sucks. Sit there more than once, but the first thing I think you really need to do is pay attention to the wind, especially however the ground's broke up, if you're in like kind of a gully or anything like that. Because I had one that was the best stand I've ever hung in my entire life, and I still believe that it was the best spot. But I think now I know the reason that it was the best spot is because you could not kill a deer from it.
Because
It was
circling wind. I know where you're talking about.
Yeah, I called it Kill Hill because we had a stand across from it. It's where you saw Ralph.
Yep.
And it was the most primo, beautiful bedding. Just every tree was absolutely shredded. And then there was like basically a cliff off the backside. When Bryce hunted it with me, he was at least 100 feet off the ground because it's a 70-foot drop on the one side and it's only, 25 or 30 feet on the other side. But and so I figured with that cliff being there and then the way that the ground laid, that in northwest wind, it was going to be impossible for us to get winded, because that was a big like canyon almost, where they'd have to smell us 200 yards across there in order to be able to wind us. So I felt as though and the access was good. I felt as though we had the best spot you could possibly have. We sat it one morning, and the wind was actually, I think I texted you. I texted one of you two
I remember.
and asked, what is your wind? And you're like, it's stout northwest. And ours was straight east. And so it ruined the spot because, well, and two, that was the other thing I loved about it, is there was only 2 spots for a deer to be able to come up if they came from behind us, and then they had to come to us.
Like the wind swirls some way that's always.
You could have any wind direction you wanted, and no matter what, it was east.
Well, that's
straight into the bedding area.
That same farm, if you remember, farther north of there on that fence line, where we saw Bullwinkle, and Mom and I saw Ralph, and same thing. We have, I'm looking for a southwest wind to blow over the river. I have a river there, and it would circle back, and every deer was winding us. And we hunted it with 2 different winds and got the same thing. That's when you got to be willing to just say, the reason the deer are here is because they know they're safe 100%. You can't hunt them there. You can't force that issue.
Mm-mm.
If you try to, you're going to lose.
Yeah, you're going to burn that out pretty fast probably.
I think one of the things that I've really taken into, I did a tip on one of our Instagram stories the other day, and I know you guys do it some. Warren, I know, does it, and you take notes on it too. I'll say don't hunt your trail cameras. First off, like, yes and no. Like, hunt your trail cameras, it'll give you tons and tons of information. But I also have trail cameras where if I'm sitting by it, I can see the deer that are going in front of it, and I can see deer that I'm clearly missing. So it's like, don't bank everything on that. But what I will say for a new farm is I take and I've started doing this more because I can't believe I was dumb enough not to. All my cameras that are spread out and everything, I don't know about you guys, but I don't save doe pictures or videos. Not very often, at least, because I just too much. So I don't ever really pay that much attention to when the does are there. And then I'm saving all the buck pictures, everything. I'm taking mental notes or whatever when the bucks are there. Well, what I've found is that, okay, early season, if I'm trying to kill does, first off, I have no idea. I can't ever remember, like, okay, were they there in the evening or in the morning, whatever it was. Second off, I want to know when they are there consistently, because during the rut, if they're there, that's where the bucks are going to be at. So what I've started doing is I take, like, typically my target deer or whatever my top ones, or ones I just want to keep notes on or tabs on, and I write down every location, every time, date, whatever, all the information I can get on that. And when you start laying that out, it is incredible to see
Paints a picture.
the patterns that they are doing. When I'm sitting here thinking, okay, it's middle of October and they're doing whatever, they're random. They might not be down to like a daily pattern, but they are still down. Like, I can see, okay, this is definitely their area where they're making circles, or they're coming to here and here, or they get to over here every once in a while to check stuff out. But then during the rut, maybe when that's all run out, then they're going to go somewhere else, whatever it is. But taking those trail cameras and spreading them out into areas where I can take as many notes as possible to see where I'm getting maybe another buck on this camera, or another deer that is brand new on this one, but he never touches this one. I've gotten so many different notes this year off of that specifically.
I think that'd be a good thing. Is, let's just say you have a new property, and let's say it's 100 acres, and 60% timber bedding, 40% food. One, how many cameras do you think should ideally be on that? But then let's just say that
how many acres?
100. Two, that you can't just go and buy an endless amount of cameras. Yeah. How many do you need? And so is it ever worth putting a camera 100 yards from another one? That's where I'm going. My point. Like, will you get different deer on it? Will you get different information?
Yep. I have, first off, to answer that, you don't need the cameras. They're great. And I know Dad has done plenty of hunting without cameras. I know you have too. A lot of people love setting a stand where they've never sat before, have any idea on what's in there, and still can find your deer. It just takes a little more time, a little more effort. But for 100 acres, I guess, I don't know. I don't have a set number. It depends on what it is. But I tell you right now, I have a field that is ridiculous because I have one camera there within 100 yards, just like he said. I've had 2 big deer on them making scrapes and hammering it. The other one that's 100 yards away, never gotten a single buck on it. I wouldn't even know if that field has bucks in it.
That's the other thing I think is sometimes I do think we would be better off not using cameras at all, because I know that once you get pictures of something, it like gets in your mind that is the only deer that are there.
Yeah.
Like those bucks, these are the only bucks I have an opportunity at. Which I think, if you didn't have that information, you may be much more open-minded to what could show up. But I know that gets in your head.
The other thing about trail cameras, which now we're kind of getting on to trail camera topic.
Well, hang on, though. We didn't really answer the question. I guess to answer the question of how many per acre is what you're saying. If you have 100 acres, I think it's always going to depend on the ground, and how it lays. And if you got a food source, can you be on the food source somewhere, an entry point of whatever. I think we've all had situations where we own an 80-acre piece that we own. Right now I have 2 cameras on it, and I feel pretty confident that I know basically, but there's been years past where I had 5. I know pretty much who's there and what's going on. But at the same time, I've turned around and had one, like you're talking about, you have food that tells me deer entering or leaving, and that's where video really has changed a lot of stuff, that you are able to see what's going on, which direction they came from, what are they doing. And then you would maybe have another one on a scrape, which might give you an inventory of the bucks that are there.
Well, and I'll tell you too, though, don't take too much information from that as far as the videos of which direction they're coming from. Now, if you're on a food source, that might be okay. But the prime example of this is just the other day, I had a camera where the deer that I'm chasing showed up on that camera where down by a field edge, and he was there at like 5:20 or something. And then I got another picture of him on one of my rub trees destroying the buck junkie at like 6:30. And the direction he comes from, I had sworn that he came from this other food source, because he comes from the direction that other food source is, but yet I had a picture of him an hour earlier.
Opposite direction.
Yeah, and so.
Well, the blind deer that you shot.
Yeah.
I texted you and told you we just had a blind deer here, and he left us and went north, and you were hunting 300 yards south of us, and it wasn't 10 minutes, 15 minutes when you said. Just killed your blind deer. And I'm like, how in the world could he have possibly gotten over there? Number one, he couldn't go very far, very fast, because he couldn't see, but he had gone one direction and ended up all the way in another direction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with you that you got to be careful. I mean.
So what's the ideal number? And like, where's your position on them?
100 acres, I'd say I would, if it's brand new and I have no idea, at least 5 to give me, which I feel like sounds kind of like a lot.
Let's just say you only have 3.
I'm just going to place them on
strategic as I can in those crossing areas, those edges, places where I feel like I'm going to be able to start to see the most deer that I can see.
So you're going to so I guess it's a 2-step process to that then. The first one is trying to kind of get an idea of what's there and what the deer are doing. And then are you going to leave them there, or are you going to adjust those cameras and try and get them more into an area to be able to help you capitalize and kill a deer?
I move my stuff around quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too. I think if I had 3, I'd be trying to find the best stuff I could as far away from each other as I could, just to try to get different deer and see what may be there and coming in from the neighbors this way or whatever.
See, in my opinion, whether it's 100 acres, whatever it is, the biggest tip I would use is go scout it the best you can. It does not matter what time of year it is. There's obviously better times of the year than others. But no matter what the premise of it is, do your best to read the land, read where you think the deer are coming from, bedding in and everything. And when you set those first couple stands or a stand, be patient with it, 100%. You're going to set that stand and just be willing to or understand well enough that, look, I could have set this spot perfectly and I don't ever have to move it again. But then again, I could have set this spot where I'm going to have to move it 10 yards or 100 yards. So the biggest thing to me is go hunt it. Trust your gut or trust your instinct on where you think or reading sign and where they're at, and just be patient and understand and have the work ethic to know that, okay, there's a good chance I'm going to have to move these stands, but once I figure it out, I'm going to be.
But that gut feeling comes with time, comes with experience. You'll walk into an area and all of a sudden you'll say, this is it. You mentioned earlier a place where there weren't any rubs or scrapes yet, but you're like, this is where they're going to hit this.
Yep.
But that takes time to develop that.
Well, I think you also need to stay positive with it, because is what I'm going through is one of the farms we hunt now. it sucks this year as far as quality of deer, but traditionally it's one of the best farms that we've had. I didn't like it at first. Now I was also 16 or 17 and not quite as smart as I am at this point. But anyways, I
Hasn't
didn't
gotten much better.
I didn't like that.
Yeah, obviously not, because let's see, he's 26 now, and we've had it like 6 years, so that would mean
We've
he's
had it
20,
longer
not
than that.
16.
I'm pretty sure we've had it longer than that, but maybe not. Anyways, the point is that there was a lot of deer up there, and it is a great farm. But at first, it was completely different than what we were used to hunting, and we had a few sits up there and stuff, and so it didn't look as good to me, and it didn't look like there was many deer or many reasons for them to be there. And so I dismissed it way too quickly. Is what I'm saying is, you may have stuff where the ground lays completely different, and that there may be just as many deer there. They're just in different areas. Like what I tell you about this farm we found the other day is, compared to some of the other stuff where we have these really large bedding areas and we know that there's going to be a bunch of deer in there. I think there's plenty of deer there, and there's already some good bucks up there, but they're also much more sporadic. Like there's not like a whole bunch of singular spots that this is where they all are, but there's definitely deer bedding there, and I think that a lot of them are using little smaller pockets of timber and stuff, which could be a huge advantage when you find the right deer.
Well, I think that we need to back up, because the farm you're talking about, one of the reasons why you didn't like it was the cattle. And now you're dealing with cattle on the new farm that you're hunting, and you deal with cattle where you're at.
I've dealt with it forever.
Well, but that farm was the first one that taught me that deer will tolerate cattle pretty well. They'll not be right where they are, but they will move around them, because when, as you were saying, you didn't like it, and one of the things was, every time I go there, the cows walk over underneath me and stuff like that. And that's some of the stand placement. I would say what saved us on that farm was trail cameras.
Yeah.
The reason that we decided that we were going to keep hunting it is we got a few trail camera photos of some really good deer. And we were like, well, maybe we should give this another shot. And then once we gave it another shot, then we started to find out. And like you said, now you're talking about a farm where and when Warren's talking about it was different, it was a big block of timber, and so they could come through anywhere. But once we got that honed down and kind of figured where they're coming through, we went from rarely seeing a deer or a few deer here, and this is a bad spot in cattle, to seeing sometimes 25, 30, 40 deer in a sit in the timber.
Yeah.
I will say this though about cattle. I love eating them.
I don't like them.
I love eating them, but
Cows.
as far as hunting, they can be great and they can be awful. And the reason I say they can be great is because first off, it depends on, like when you say that they will work around or work through them, whatever, the deer will be okay with the cows. It depends on
How many?
how many there are, how used to the cows they are in there. And the reason I say that is because on the place that I hunt, I have cows supposed to be in pastures in certain areas, and I know where they're supposed to be, but they get out a lot. So they're like, I'm dealing with them in certain areas where they shouldn't be. But with that, I have one spot now where I have trail camera pictures and videos of cows in the background and one of my biggest deer right there making a scrape. He doesn't care. But then again, I just set a stand in a spot that I moved it because I observed where I'd set it and I put it in the wrong spot, but I got to see where the deer were coming out of. Well, I learned pretty quickly that where the deer were coming out of, I can use the cattle to my advantage because they're bedding in one area, but where they're trying to go to, the cows are in the way. So I never see them walking through the cows. I always see them, they pop up somewhere else. I'm like, where the heck are these deer coming from? Because there's nothing there. Well, they come out right there. And what I think, now I have to sit the stand, they're skirting around the cows.
Yeah, are.
They're going from one spot to another spot. So now all I got to do is I know where they're at, where they're bedding. I got the stand where on the edge of where the cows are at, and they're probably going to come. The theory is they're going to come right in front of me because they're just bumping around the cows.
Well,
so you can use them to your advantage.
Don't get me
point.
wrong. I've gotten out of my stand and walked the cows off before. I mean, because I wanted to stay there, but I didn't want them when they're right there. There's nothing more annoying because you're not going to have a deer walk underneath you when there's a cow 5-10 yards from your stand.
Yeah.
I've wanted to jump on one's back forever.
Well, I've
how
definitely
epic that
gone.
footage
I
would
have,
be.
cannot tell you how many things I've thrown at cows
But I think
because I don't want to get out of the stand. I've gone through my path.
the
I've gotten
biggest
down.
disadvantage of cows is when there's a whole bunch of them in one spot and they ruin the habitat.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I have with cows. Is there's certain spots where they'll put so many of them in there that
And they
there's
eat
nothing
everything.
left.
All
There's
the
no cover.
vegetation's gone.
There's
Or they
no
don't
reason for a deer
rotate.
to bed there.
Right.
Now, adversely, and I don't know if you guys have hunted around them, horses. I've hunted farms that had horses on them, and for whatever reason, the deer seem to love them. They don't mind being around them.
Reggie.
Well, I mean, where Reggie's at, I don't know if there's. I know.
No,
there's
I'm
deer
thinking
there.
I'm going to bring Reggie and tie him to my tree.
But now the only thing is, I did shoot a doe one time that fell dead in the horse pasture, and I went to get the doe, and a horse attacked me, and would not. I mean, like I had to run and jump through the fence to get out of its way. And later on, someone told me it was the smell of the blood, but this horse would not let me get my deer. And I did it 3 times until finally I waited till the horse went way over on the other side of the pasture, and I ran over, grabbed it, and was dragging it back, and the horse didn't even lift its head that time. But for 3 times, that horse came charging.
Remember you telling me that story? That's nuts.
I've never heard that story.
We just lost one of our podcasters, so we got a dog issue.
So what's your method then? As far as I think that we've established. So what's your method to? I'm going to learn this property, and where you're going to start.
I think what you guys have expressed is probably the basics, and that is, I get a new property. I'm starting remote first. I'm doing something on the computer. I'm looking. My biggest thing is we look for blocks of timber that attach, especially in Iowa or the Midwestern states where timber is sometimes hard to come by, and that can be. You can use that to your advantage, and so if you get permission to hunt a chunk, maybe you are the destination for bedding. Maybe you are a corridor between another big block of timber and another one, and like a river or a creek bottom that runs that. I'm looking on that. That leads me where I'm going. Once I get in there, and I agree with Easton, I would say 2 to 3 years before I really feel like I know the property. Can you get fortunate enough to – we have a property where Marty killed his first deer with his bow that we killed on the first year there. Now, granted, it wasn't one of our mature deer that he shot, but it was still a nice deer. But then you killed yours last year, same farm, second year. So, but we, again, had found the edges. We kind of, and that was one of those ones where that was a gut feeling for me. I had the stand. Eli was with me when we hung the stand the first time, and we never hunted it. And then the leaves fell, I think, is what showed me what I needed to see. And once I saw it, I was like, we need to move this stand. And Eli said, you haven't even hunted it yet. And I was like, I know, but it's in the wrong spot. And so we move it over there. And then the next year you come in and, jump up there, we get the wind right and kill a deer. So, and that's probably one of my, as much as I love to shoot a deer, I love playing that chess match with them. I love trying to figure out. And so there's a whole lot of times when we win that we don't kill a deer. And I would say, and this time of year is why I love this time of year, because that's when the game is being played the most, meaning you really are matching wits with the whitetail up until the rut. Once the rut, basically put yourself in the timber somewhere where those deer are, and there's a chance you might get a shot because he's covering a lot of ground if he's chasing a doe.
Yeah.
We're
trying to find the next one.
But that October time or the late season time, that's what else is going to benefit you is, you make it through a hunting season. You got all the information that you've gathered there, but then at the season ends, you might get to, now you can see. I mean, it becomes a road map. When we're looking for sheds, I mean, I've seen trails, I've seen rubs, I've seen old scrapes. I'm like, holy cow, how did I not see this before?
I think the best time to learn a farm outside of hunting season, or not even just any new property, is shed season.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. You can see everything. You can see tons of trails. Rubs are still fresh enough that you can see them. Scrapes, a lot of times you can still see them. And that helped us a lot on this place is we did get to walk that, and I'd already marked a couple places that I felt looked good. And Eli and I went back there, and we didn't some of it wasn't there wasn't as much sign as we thought there was going to be, but we did jump about 140-some inch deer within 100 yards there, 200 yards. But there was lots of acorns, and I guarantee you there's deer in there.
Yeah.
So different parts of different parts of the country, different things you'll focus on. In Midwest, a lot of us are focusing on corn and beans, but like going back when I used to live down south, a lot of it was pin oaks and white oaks. White oaks are a big deal, and that's a big deal even in the Midwest. If you don't have a lot of them, when you find a white oak tree, a lot of times you're going to find your deer. You found like a oasis in the woods. I mean, especially if you have a ton of red oaks and then here's a white oak and it produces, those deer will travel a long ways to find them. Also, when I lived in Arkansas, persimmon trees, but you only had like 7 or 8 days when they would ripen and drop. But when they did, the deer pummeled them. And I'm sure there's different vegetation. You need to learn that kind of stuff. We couldn't cover all that in this podcast. You have to find out what it is in your area
That's where I think that learning to read the sign and having the ability to be mobile is going to be the biggest advantage on learning a new place. Sit multiple parts and watch the deer and learn that information. You're going to figure it out way quicker than just sitting stationary.
And I think that's where the saddle, I mean, I've only done it once, but I think that saddle does give you that ability. You're just basically packing sticks.
Yeah.
And you go in somewhere, because let's talk a little
Once
bit
there's
about
some more packable sticks. It'll be freaking, I would be all over it. Someone's going to come out with some really good sticks soon.
Yep.
The thing that we've kind of looked over that I would not look over is, assuming it's private property, listen to your farmer. 100%.
Yeah.
Because now, granted, it depends on, like, if you're trying to listen for size, I've found it's like 50-50 with a farmer, because sometimes they really don't give a crap whether or not it's a deer, like a big buck or not. All they see is a big rack. They're like, oh, there's a huge one over there. But what they're telling you and all those things is where the deer are at all the time. My farmer is always telling me, well, they're always coming through this waterway over here. I'm like, well, send them my way, because I sit in that stand and I don't see a freaking deer. So, but you listen to them, and they'll tell you at least where the deer are, because they're out there more than anybody. They're going to know.
That right there is a good thing to note, too, is I think some stands that aren't maybe as obvious, especially in timber spots, try them with a couple different winds, because you may have deer coming from places that you didn't think that they were coming from. Right. Mm-hmm. And then before, when you were hunting with the northwest wind and they're all coming from that cornfield that's, 3/4 of a mile to the south, you didn't see anything. Well, that's why. Then you hunt it with the south wind. All of a sudden, you got 20 deer in there. So be willing to try a couple
That's a
winds.
big thing for, like, what I've been doing when I set stands. Like I've preached on this podcast specifically, be ready to move it, because it might not be in the right spot. But what I do when I do have that gut feeling, I'm like, man, this is in the right spot, and I still am not seeing the deer that I should be, or even like if I have a trail camera in the area and there's all sorts of deer on it, I'm not, and it's during daylight, I'm not seeing that, then I either look at where the stand is at, for one, and two, if I'm like, it's got to be in the right spot, I just got to wait it out, I'll try to hunt it with almost any kind of wind. Like if I'm hunting with what I think and I'm not seeing much, okay, well, then I'll go in, and I just did this with one of our stands. I ended up moving it anyways, but I hunted with a different stand, and a different wind, and we did see different deer coming from a different area.
So what equipment, other than we've talked about a saddle, I would say hunting a new farm, one of the least, as far as equipment goes, is a ladder. Ladders are, and the reason I say that now, unless you're hunting
a ladder stand.
Okay. Packing a ladder stand around to put it up one time.
Carrying an aluminum ladder through the woods. I'm just gonna
I've done
this
that
up there.
But at the same time, though, I've
the
packed
fire department.
one of those 12-foot ladders. I can I can move it myself, and it's a one-man operation, and I'll pick it up and move it. But hang on stands. Climbing, because a climbing stand kind of comes into the sticks. If you can use it in your area, I would tell you down south that every tree is like a telephone pole.
East and I have zero experience with them, because there's no trees here that you could even.
Right.
I have wanted one so bad. I'm sitting here thinking like,
I got one at the house.
I can't use it. That's the only reason. I'm like, I look around. I even take the time to think about it. I'm like, okay, could I use a climber? No, I don't have like any trees in the right area.
Right.
But too many one thing that people hate, or a lot of people hate, that I love them, as long as your farmer's okay with it, screw in steps. If you're trying to go somewhere where you want to get anywhere you need,
no, thank you.
Because Dad has said it before, and he's 100% right. I'm a huge fan of putting a stand in the correct spot and being uncomfortable. I don't care. As long as it ain't going to fall out of the tree, I'm 100% okay with sitting in a stand that's crooked as crap, because it's in the right tree where it needs to be. And with that, I can use screw-in steps to get into a lot of those places. And that you don't have to keep; those are cheap. They go in your pack. You screw them in. You aren't committed to one spot if you don't want to be. And all you're basically packing now is just a hang on.
Well, the other one that goes along with that, though, then I think more people dislike this than what they do. The screw-in steps is a ground blind. There'll be places that you won't be able to put a stand, and don't be afraid to brush in a ground blind or throw a ground blind in. I've used them for observation by finding a big field edge, something drops off, and I can sit right next to the farmer's got hay bales or something, pop a blind up. Chances of me killing a deer that day is probably not good, but that's not what I'm there for. I'm there to observe, and I don't want to stick out like a turd sitting on top of a round bale. So
I will. The only thing I would disagree with that is I'll put a blind out and stuff, but typically I'm going to do that where I want it
Right
because
when you know-
I can't. Just for instance, though, I hate ground blinds. First off, until they've come out like the Primos ones with the 360 view, I cannot stand not being able to see around me. It drives me up a wall.
They should come with a
But-
chiropractor from
Yeah,
looking out.
having to look up and everything.
Yeah.
But I will, like, I just put a blind in the other day that you let me use because there's no stand there, but I hate it. I hate using a blind, but I'm going to put it there. Thing is, it took me an hour and a half to
Brush
brush
it
it in and everything how I wanted it. So I know that if I'm going to go be trying to move around, if I'm using a blind in somewhere where I'm going to have to brush it in, I would probably be better if I'm going to have to use it or, like, move it. I'm probably better off. I'll just go cut some limbs and sit there.
Well, Dad's
and
got the
cover
best
me up.
idea ever, and we should charge you guys for this. So you just appreciate it. Because it's a good idea. I'll give it to him. He's taken, what are those, pallet jacks? Pallets, and put them places where you might want a blind, and so that the deer get used to something being there. So then when instead of you having to buy 5 blinds, you can have 1 blind and put those pallets there, and the deer get used to it. And from what we found, you can then go just interchange your blind at any time, and the deer don't care because they're used to some structure.
You
being
guys
there.
hunted it the day that at the 80.
That was the
You and
first day
Joey.
that
That
I
was
did.
the very. I put that in that morning, and there's 3 pallets there.
Yeah.
I just put the one in
And
the
they didn't
north
care.
field
Yeah,
last
I mean,
night.
Yeah, they walked right there. They never even looked at it.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to be able to get
It's-
deer used to it, that you don't have to have multiple blinds out in different places, that you
I
can
didn't
still
even put
get
it in that morning.
Yeah, I took it over there and put it there, and then you guys
Holding
went there that
information from me. I wouldn't have probably sat there.
No, but and so I would agree with what you guys both have said, and the best way to put that is, you really, when you're hunting out of a ground blind, I think a ground blind makes you a better hunter, and what I mean by that is it makes you have to focus on, I'm going to shoot here. You're not capable, especially us with a camera. We can't like open the back window and shoot back there and be able to get it on film. We have to shoot where we aim that front wall at, and so you got to know where you're going to shoot at, and so I agree that it's not the best observation, or it's not like a something for new, but it's super effective for CRP or wheat fields or something like that, where you just can't get a tree stand anywhere. So they can be super helpful. It's definitely something that I want to have in my arsenal, and I've now killed quite a few deer out of a ground. I like ground blinds. I'm used to sitting in them, but I also feel confident where I'm sitting.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you can pair with them, if we're talking about something like that I just did, is the blind I set they should come walking right by. But there's one spot where it's kind of up in the air whether they're going to choose to come in or not. And so I put a rub post in that's 20 yards where I can shoot it. First off, I just want them to hit one of my freaking rub posts. I'm trying so hard. Second off, I think that as long as they do start hitting that, that's just going to give them a little extra confidence. Okay, instead of going across the creek here in that spot where it's 50-50 if they're going to go across or come to you, they got more of a reason to come over here. I'm going to go make a rub. And then they're
I
right
did
in
the
front of you
same.
at 20 yards.
Should I show people the picture of the one I just set yesterday?
Sure.
I can show it where I'll hold it up here, and you can see the ground blind in the background and the rub tree out in the field. And that's because
I'm just laughing at the fact that we're going to have to try to zoom in on
He'll
this.
zoom in on it. He's got it. Eli's the man. I mean, Nick is okay, but Eli's the man. He's doing it. You get it? Yeah. So anyhow, I agree with Easton. The other one that you could employ there, and I know you guys haven't used them a lot. I think you and I have a few times, and I used to use it more than I do now as a decoy. But boy, you got to be careful with decoys. And I think we saved that for. We were going to do something on call.
We'll bring in Shane for that podcast.
Yeah, he's got some really good decoy.
Yeah, he does.
So, what else is there on like discovering a new piece of property? I think we should address a little bit on the guy who's hunting public for the first time, and that is you might not be able to leave trail cameras, or you're going to want to lock them. If you're going to leave them there. The other one would be is pay as much attention as to the other people, how they're coming in and what's going on, as you are to the deer themselves. Be different. Don't be afraid to sit right next to the parking area. I mean, I'm talking like you can hear the guys talking in their trucks. I can't, and I've done it with whitetails, but an elk that I don't know if you guys remember Janet from Montana.
From the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her
Yeah,
husband.
she was Golds. She was our teacher, wasn't she? Or my teacher?
No, that's Felicia you're thinking about, I think.
Short-haired lady.
Think about the jacked old lady, Jana.
Jan, yeah,
That's who you're thinking
Jan.
of.
That was just Jan.
Oh.
Janet was Mom's friend, and she got married. And Sean, her husband, wanted to go elk hunting, and so we went up to the high woods and we took off. We march around all over the place. We've been going all day. I'm doing all the calling, and he's like, "Do you care if I blow my bugle?" And I was like, "No, go ahead. We're only 300 yards from the truck, you know." And he freaking blows this horrible bugle, and Bulb screams. I'm like, "What the heck?" And then before
Do it again.
no, we didn't even have a chance. He popped out.
Oh.
And so here he comes. I'm sitting there with my bow laying next to me, and I look over and I'm like, "Sean, shoot this bull." And he's frozen. I mean, he's got a bow in his hand and everything, and I don't have mine because we had just shot at a grouse. My point is that we were
Flinging arrows at birds.
we were back to the truck. We had hunted for like 7 or 8 hours straight, nothing. And then
How big a bull?
320, 315.
shoot.
I mean, like a giant, nice bull.
Did he shoot it?
No, he froze completely solid. I'm trying
Did
to
nothing?
did absolutely nothing. Bow sitting just like this the whole time, and I get all the way to getting my bow off the ground, get an arrow knocked, and I'm going, "Sean, shoot the bull, shoot the bull," and he just was like dumbfounded. He was like, "That was so cool." Later on, and I was like, "It was so cool, but why didn't you shoot?" I didn't have a shot. Dude, he was 26 or 27 yards, and I got all the way to the point where I was at full draw, and that's what made him run. And we were not even 300 yards. At that point, we were like 200 yards from the parking area, 4 or 5 trucks up there. One guy said he thought he heard a bugle, but he said it sounded not very good, which I think he heard Sean. And then he didn't even hear this bull bugle and respond, and here we were about to kill a bull. So don't overlook something that might be really obvious.
Yeah.
It was almost a like true look at this. Look at what we just did. Because we could have got the guys in the parking area to help pack that one out.
Yeah.
That would have been nice.
So, but as far as, public land versus private, I think you're going to want to spend as much time as you possibly can. If you get that new property, don't be kicking yourself if you don't kill a deer that first year. Just think about how much knowledge you're going to know, about that place.
You're going to be learning a lot.
Be willing to sit the odd spots as well.
Yep.
But I tell you, don't waste too much time in them. So I think to summarize, then I guess we all agree that, one, you got to scout it. You're going to have to take time. You're going to
Even
have
if
to
it's
go through
during
it.
hunting season.
Yep. You're going to have to learn by sign where the deer are. You're also going to have to spend a lot of time sitting stands and knowing that you're going to have to move those stands. And then try and understand the deer and where they're coming from, and that it may take you may not learn it, get it down. I think that the mobile aspect can cut down the learning curve a great bit, but it's still going to take you probably, you need to be ready to take a year, 2, 3 years to really
Invest in it.
to know that piece of property.
Yep. And
So
And I think the other thing would be, if you're going into a blind, look at the travel corridors, the little tiny crossings and all that stuff's going to be the same forever. So start there if you're not sure where to start. And like what Easton said, and then start with your food, and work back from there. Because sometimes food is much easier to find on a map or something than it is to find bedding.
yeah.
Bedding, you almost have to see the timber because you can see it all from an aerial and it looks like timber. Then you may get there and it's drop-offs, or it's really flat, or it's really, really thick.
Yep.
It doesn't show you what kind of timber we're talking about, and because here I would tell you, like the locust patches and stuff like that, boy, would the deer love them here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the stuff that borders those locust patches is usually really, really thick.
Yep.
And so those can be your really good bedding areas. Oh, we must have hit a nerve.
Yeah,
He lit up.
No, last tip that I just realized, or I've been doing it naturally and just realized that I would tell somebody to do, is if you got somewhere, for instance, I have a big chunk of timber, and there's a creek. It's not even running anymore. It's just dried up. But a creek that runs all the way through the entire chunk of timber. Pay attention to something like that, because a lot of times you'll probably find them working up and down the
banks
creek,
of it.
and granted, the nice part about mine is on one end of the creek, and I say it because it keeps going, but one spot where I can start hunting is a bunch of food on the neighbor, and then the creek runs right into their bedding. So, and I like right now it's blowing up with scrapes. You can't walk anywhere without seeing a scrape. So if you're in a new spot, you got food somewhere close to it, and there's a something to help them travel through where they're trying to go, sit there. You're probably going to see quite a few working on the edge or working around it or things like that. So
Well, you just said something that made me think of this morning. And this morning, Nick and I were sitting in a stand. Be careful that you go check. You're hunting a new property and you go scout on a day. Let's just say that it's October 24th, like it is today, and the wind's been blowing or a little storm system came through, and you're not seeing any scrapes. May not be that they're not there. They're covered in leaves.
Yeah.
And if you do find scrapes, then they're fresh. They've just been worked. So keep that stuff. Make sure you're thinking about all that kind of stuff and taking that into account.
Yep.
Because this morning I was sitting there and we had made a scrape, and I'm like, there's no sign of my scrape down there, and it was just completely covered in leaves.
Yep. All right.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you, and we will talk to you next time when we
keep leaving the good
the
reviews. We appreciate it.
Yeah, the reviews, and not only
and sending us topics.
That's where this one came from, and the next one that we're going to do is also came from you guys asking for certain things, and not that we got plenty of things we like to talk about, but we'd rather talk about what you want us to talk about. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here.